There are ideas so powerful, so unsettling, that once you hear them, you can never go back to who you were before. Emil Cioran's philosophy is one of those ideas. He doesn't try to comfort you. He doesn't sell hope. Instead, he hands you a mirror, cracked, honest, and terrifyingly accurate. Through it, you don't see the world. You see yourself, naked, small, waking up in a reality that no longer pretends to make sense. Cioran believed that the greatest illusion we carry is the belief that life must have meaning. But what if it doesn't? What if the collapse of meaning is not the end of your sanity, but the beginning of your liberation? Born in Romania in 1911, and later writing in French, Cioran didn't aim to be a traditional philosopher. He wasn't interested in logic or systems. He was a poet of despair, a mystic of meaninglessness. And yet, behind his bleak sentences, there is a strange clarity, even a serenity, that invites us to look deeper, not away. He once wrote, "To exist is a habit I do not despair of losing." What does that even mean? It's not nihilism in the shallow sense. It's not nothing matters, so who cares? It's deeper. It's darker. It's about facing the unbearable fact that even though we are here, conscious, aware, suffering, striving, there is no cosmic guarantee that any of it matters at all. And yet, we continue. We cling to ideas, to identities, to futures we imagine and pasts we romanticize. But why? Cioran believed it was precisely because of our awareness, the curse of being awake in a meaningless world, that humans invented gods, ideologies, and even the concept of progress. He called these inventions the opiates of those who tremble. He saw religion, optimism, even personal growth as forms of illusion designed to protect us from collapse. Not physical collapse, but existential collapse. The collapse of certainty, of direction, of the self. But here's the paradox that makes Cioran so dangerously interesting. He didn't want to die. He wrote about suicide, often. He called it the only serious philosophical problem. But he also admitted that it was the thought of suicide that gave him the strength to go on. In a way, knowing he could leave this world at any moment gave him the freedom to stay. That's the first crack in the wall. That's where it begins. Collapse isn't always loud. Sometimes it's silent, internal. You wake up one day and the ideas you built your life on just evaporate. You can't believe what you used to believe. You can't unsee what you've seen. And you're left floating between what was and what will never be again. This is the moment Cioran wrote from. Not from a podium, not from a lecture hall, but from a lonely room at 3 a.m. where the walls feel like they're listening and the silence has weight. He didn't preach. He confessed. And in that rawness, he told a deeper truth. Sometimes, collapse is the most honest thing that can happen to a human being, because once the masks fall, once the false hopes die, you are left with only what's real. Or at least, what refuses to be denied: your breath, your pain, your awareness. And in that raw, brutal space, a strange freedom emerges. The freedom to no longer pretend. Cioran wrote, "It is not worth the bother of killing yourself, since you always kill yourself too late." It's not a statement of despair. It's a dark joke about our addiction to endurance. We survive things we never thought we could survive. And then we curse the fact that we survived them. We say we want freedom, but when collapse comes, we fight it. We cling harder. But what if collapse is the invitation? What if falling apart is the beginning of falling through, into something deeper than happiness or achievement, into clarity, into stillness, into the realization that the worst thing isn't death, It's never having lived in truth. And what is truth? For Sioran, it wasn't a set of facts. It was the refusal to lie to yourself, the refusal to numb the ache of being with noise. He once said, "Clarity is the worst torment." And yet, he sought it obsessively. Because in clarity, there is no more pretending. There's only what is, and the quiet miracle that you can still observe it. Modern life, Sioran believed, was a theater of distraction. We fill our time with activity, our heads with ideology, our hearts with hope. But underneath it all is a fear we never face, that nothing we build will last, that no achievement will fill the void, and that no one really knows what they're doing. He didn't say this to depress you. He said it because it's true. And truth, even dark truth, is strangely comforting. Because once you stop running, once you stop pretending there's a finish line, you can finally sit still. And in that stillness, you might hear something that no noise can teach you. Sioran's entire life was a slow peeling away of illusions. He didn't give answers. He gave fractures, thoughts that crack open the surface of the soul. "A book is a suicide postponed," he wrote. Meaning, we write not to share wisdom, but to delay the fall. And yet in that delay, something beautiful happens. The human spirit speaks honestly, even if it speaks in despair. Maybe despair is not the opposite of hope. Maybe it's the foundation of something deeper, something more real. Sioran saw through the world and didn't look away. He didn't dress up suffering with spiritual cliches. He stood inside it, and from there, whispered truths that only those who have collapsed will ever truly understand. Sioran's writing is like rain falling on a cracked window. It doesn't shatter things. It reveals the fractures that were already there. When he speaks of despair, he isn't asking you to indulge it. He's asking you to stop hiding from it. Because beneath the despair is something raw, untamed, and real, the soul stripped of its illusions. He didn't see despair as a failure. He saw it as a form of lucidity. To see the world clearly, without distortion, is not euphoric. It's humbling, terrifying. But it's also the only way to ever taste true peace. Not the peace that comes from achievement or order, but the peace that comes from surrendering to what is. Sioran believed that consciousness was both our curse and our only chance. Animals suffer, but they do not reflect on their suffering. They feel pain, but they do not turn it into philosophy. Humans do. And that reflection, that unbearable self-awareness, is what separates us from the natural world. We are exiles from innocence. That was his core idea. To be human in Sioran's eyes is to be permanently out of place, forever searching, never arriving. And the irony, the moment we stop searching, the moment we accept the futility of arrival, we taste something close to liberation. Because collapse, properly faced, leads to clarity. And clarity, though painful, makes us honest. He wrote, "We are all deep in a hell, each moment of which is a miracle." What a line! He's saying that even in suffering, something sacred survives, not in the form of salvation, but in the raw act of being. To be aware of pain is still to be alive. And aliveness, in its purest form, contains its own kind of grace. Modern philosophy often tries to solve the human condition. Sioran never did. He didn't try to fix anything. He didn't offer hope. What he gave instead was a kind of radical permission, the permission to fall apart, to break, to feel without numbing. And from that brokenness, to discover that what remains is still enough. This is where his work becomes truly powerful. Because in a world addicted to positivity, Sioran gives you the sacred right to be undone. Not as weakness, not as failure, but as honesty, as depth, as truth. He saw self-help as another form of distraction, another mirror trying to reflect a better version of yourself instead of revealing the one already here. Sioran didn't believe in personal growth. He believed in personal collapse, not as destruction, but as revelation. So much of our suffering, he believed, comes not from life itself, but from our resistance to it. We're constantly trying to be more than we are, to prove our worth, to escape pain. But in doing so, we run from what we most need to face. Collapse is not failure. It's a confrontation with the truth. He wrote, "A distant enemy is always preferable to one at home." And what he meant was that the real war is internal. The outer world may break us, but it is our inner war, our resistance to reality, that leaves us shattered. Until we face that enemy, we will stay caught in cycles of self-deception. In Sioran's world, healing does not come from overcoming. It comes from dissolving, from letting go of the illusion that we were ever supposed to be whole in the first place. What if your brokenness is not something to fix, but something to feel, to understand, to embrace? He speaks to the part of us that's tired of pretending, tired of optimism as a disguise, tired of painting over the cracks. His words strip away the false armor we wear, the one built from goals, identities, and distractions. And what's left? Just this moment, this breath, this strange, inexplicable miracle of still being here. Sioran teaches you to stop running. Not because the world is safe, but because running makes you blind. He wants you to sit in the fire, not to burn, but to see what survives the flames. That is collapse. That is awakening. And it never looks the way we thought it would. Only one thing matters: learning to be the loser. It's one of his most brutal lines, but what he means is not defeat, it's freedom. When you lose everything you thought you needed to be happy, and you're still here, you find something stronger than happiness. You find endurance, awareness, a strange kind of quiet. Sioran lived in contradiction. He was a pessimist who loved beauty, a nihilist who found joy in language, a philosopher of despair who saw humor in suffering. This contradiction is not weakness, it's the truth of being human. We are walking paradoxes, and that's what makes us real. His vision of collapse isn't about destruction for its own sake. It's about honesty. It's about returning to the ground of being, to that raw, trembling self that no longer needs to justify its existence. Just being, just seeing, just breathing, he asks without asking. What if this is enough? What if this, the ache, the beauty, the silence, is the real experience of being alive? Not the goal, not the improvement, but this. Now, Sioran's forgotten teachings aren't lost because they were wrong. They're forgotten because they're uncomfortable. They ask too much. They refuse to flatter. But in that refusal is a strange kind of reverence for truth, for silence, for the terrifying freedom of existence without a script. He said, "Only pessimism makes any sense when confronted with life in its totality." And yet, he kept writing. He kept thinking. He kept breathing. Why? Because even in the abyss, there is rhythm. Even in collapse, there is grace. His work is not a philosophy of despair. It is a philosophy beyond illusion. It does not ask you to change the world. It asks you to witness it, to feel it, to survive it without needing to conquer it. There is a strange kind of light that only appears after everything else has fallen. When the structures collapse, when belief systems die, when the ego is silent, there, in that sacred emptiness, something real can begin. Not something loud or spectacular, something quiet, still, enduring. Sioran doesn't ask you to believe in anything. He asks you to stop pretending. He offers no path, no salvation, no destination, only presence. The presence of thought stripped of ideology, presence in the middle of uncertainty, presence in the ruins of meaning. Most people fear collapse because they fear being nothing. But Sioran saw something different. He saw that the terror of nothingness is only terrifying when you still believe you must be someone. When identity dissolves, when the illusion of permanence vanishes, what remains isn't death. What remains is awareness. Pure, raw, present awareness. And maybe that's enough. Maybe we don't need a grand narrative to live. Maybe we don't need meaning to move through the world with wonder. Maybe the absence of certainty creates the space for something more real, not constructed, but discovered. A kind of stillness that no idea can offer. A kind of knowing that requires no belief. Sioran teaches through negation, through silence, through the pauses between words. His gift is not in what he gives you, but in what he takes away. False hope, shallow certainty, the noise of a world terrified of looking inward, and in the space that remains, you find your own reflection, unfiltered, undistorted, human. He once wrote, "Only those moments when I have ceased to be human have been the real moments of my life." What does that mean? Perhaps he's saying that when the ego drops, when the story collapses, when we are no longer trying to become anything, that's when life finally touches us. Not as an idea, but as presence. This is not a call to despair. It's a call to honesty, to feel the weight of existence without softening the edges, to walk without answers, to love without illusions, to die, metaphorically, before death takes the body, so that what's reborn in the space that follows is not a role, but a presence. Sioran understood that philosophy fails when it forgets the soul. He didn't want abstract systems. He wanted lived truths, felt truths. The kind of knowing that can't be diagrammed. The kind that shakes you at 3 a.m. when silence is louder than thought. His collapse wasn't destruction. It was a shedding of false strength, of rigid certainty, of the pride that keeps us performing. What's left after collapse is fragile, but real. Not a polished self, a breathing one, a trembling one, and that is enough. We live in an age that worships becoming, becoming successful, becoming enlightened, becoming whole. But Sioran points to the sacredness of unbecoming, the liberation of no longer needing to be more than what you are right now. In this unfinished moment, he wrote, "Chaos is rejecting all you have learned. Chaos is being yourself." This is not the chaos of confusion. It's the chaos of truth, of dropping masks, of allowing the natural disorder of the soul to speak before the mind organizes it into performance. In this way, Sioran offers a kind of spiritual rebellion, not against the world, but against the false self, against the need to impress, to explain, to matter. And what emerges is a raw presence that can witness both beauty and horror without needing either to justify its existence. That's the final truth in Sioran's forgotten philosophy. That collapse is not the end. It is the clearing, the space beyond belief, the death of all that isn't essential. And in that space, what's left is not a doctrine, not an answer, not a God. What's left is awareness, breathing, seeing, being, and isn't that enough? Maybe that's all we've ever needed, not certainty, but courage. Courage to feel, courage to fall, courage to stop lying to ourselves. Sioran didn't want you to surrender to despair. He wanted you to stop fearing it. Because when you can sit with despair, when you can hold it in your hands without needing to run, you become something terrifying and beautiful. Free, free from the need to know, free from the pressure to improve, free from the addiction to hope. You become a witness to life rather than its prisoner, not above pain, but inside it, not beyond confusion, but present with it. And maybe this is where real wisdom begins, in the collapse of what we thought we needed, in the ruins of all we thought we were. There in the stillness, we find something that doesn't scream. It whispers, and it says, "You are still here. That is enough. That is everything." Because what Sioran really teaches us isn't how to collapse, it's how to stay.